Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. Thank you all for joining us for Financial Education Class Retention. My name is Stephanie Cote. I am the Communications Manager here at First Nations Awista Corporation, and I'll be the webinar facilitator. If you have any future webinar requests or any questions or comments regarding the communications here at First Nations Awista Corporation, please email me at stephanie@awista.org. I am happy to hear from you. And does your organization need loan capital? First Nations Awista Corporation accepts loan applications on a rolling basis. Do you need capital for healthy foods endeavors? Find out more about our new and existing loan products by contacting Awista's Lending and Capitalization Manager, Emily Trump, at emily@awista.org. Awista offers expert training from committed professionals who have extensive experience in Native community economic development. Our training and technical assistance consists of several programs that not only help participants assess how starting a Native CDFI can benefit their communities, but also takes them step by step through a process of establishing one of these proven and innovative financial institutions. If you are interested in learning more about financial education in Indian country, please check out the resources provided in the follow-up email following this webinar. And I'd like to take just a few moments to get everyone situated with the webinar platform. If you could locate your question and answer box and answer the following question: what organization are you representing today? Great, I see some participants from Washington, Gallup, Lumbee Tribe, Tlingit Haida in Alaska, Choctaw Nation. Thank you all for joining us. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to use this section of the platform, and we'll answer the questions periodically throughout the presentation. We also have time set aside after the presentation to answer any questions that you might have, some lingering questions. Please feel free to type it in the question and answer section or raise your hand and I will be happy to unmute you. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. This afternoon, we have the pleasure of hearing from my esteemed Awista colleagues, all current and former training experts. We have Ms. Crystal Cornelius, who is the Executive Director here at First Nations Awista Corporation and former Executive Director of Turtle Mountain CDFI. We also have Crystal Langholz, Chief Operating Officer at First Nations Awista Corporation and former Executive Director of Punxsutawney Investments. We also have Linnell Smith, Programs Manager at First Nations Awista Corporation and former Executive Director of Navajo Partnership for Housing. And last but not least, we have Christopher Hansen, Programs Officer at First Nations Awista Corporation, with 4 years training experience with the Building Native Communities curriculum. So the first section, we're going to hear about financial education experience. So let's take a poll. The question I'd like to pose is, do you currently offer financial education training programs? Answer yes if you do, not yet if it's in development, no if you do not, or no, but we have in the past. I'll give just a few moments for you to answer that question. Okay, I see we have 67 participants that have voted, so I'll just give a few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the results are in. Everyone is currently offering financial education training programs. That's great. Hopefully, we're happy to present all of our expert information with you regarding our financial education training. And regarding financial education trainings, I'd like to pose this question to all of our panelists. What is your history and experience with facilitating financial education classes? I'll start with Crystal Cornelius.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. So my particular experience insofar as financial literacy, I was the founding executive director of the Turtle Mountain CDFI in Belcourt, North Dakota. It is a very, very rural location. We're about 10 miles from the Canadian border in north central North Dakota. So with the creation and the emergence of the Native CDFI, of course we know that we need to provide financial literacy and development courses in conjunction with our lending activities. In 2006, which was about 10 years ago, I took the training course from OESTA, the Building Native Communities, and I set up the first financial literacy training courses within my community. We had never, on a community basis, had any type of widespread financial literacy offered to the community in and of itself. There was no budgeting being done in high schools or any kind of financial toolkit, for lack of a better word, that was being permeated within our tribal population. We have about 35,000 members with 16,500 living on the reservation. So with the advent of the Turtle Mountain CDFI and our organization beginning those initial practices, the financial literacy courses that I set up on my reservation were actually the first of its kind within the history of our tribal population, and we'll get into more of the detailed experience there and certain aspects of the classes and retention and how we somewhat have to speak about money a little bit differently to our tribal communities rather than, you know, the outside world per se. But my experience, I personally taught the financial literacy courses. That was one part of my duties as executive director that I really particularly enjoyed, and we would provide those classes rain or shine once a month. We'd set a calendar and we would have them consistently throughout the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation.
Linnell?
Hi, this is Linnell Smith. My experience with financial education was with an organization that I served as executive director for called Navajo Partnership for Housing, which is now Native Partnership for Housing as they've expanded their target market currently. So we served the entire Navajo Nation and surrounding border communities, but our organization was originally created to provide homebuyer education opportunities for Native tribal members to obtain housing on the Navajo Nation. So with that, in providing homebuyer education, we realized that it was a little bit of a step above basic financial education. So we kind of hit the ground running talking about mortgage financing, talking about ratios and budgeting, the importance of your credit report. And then shortly after that, as we started conducting the homebuyer education classes, we realized that a lot of the individual participants really didn't have a good understanding of basic financial management. So we revamped our delivery system, and we realized that we needed a basic financial education course. So we too also presented or attended the Building Native Communities training, got certified, and we rolled out and implemented a financial education program. So that gave our participants an opportunity to build some basics, get the basic financial education foundation in place. So we focused on budgeting, finances, reading a credit report, how do I improve my credit? So all those pieces that were very important for them in order to obtain a mortgage loan at some point, which was really the focus of our organization. We used the BNC curriculum, but we also supplemented with additional materials, other curriculums, Pathways to Prosperity being one of them. So, and then also in working with AWISTA, I have I'm also one of the co-trainers for the Building Native Communities Train the Trainer, which we kind of reach out nationally to organizations that want to do financial education. So it's a wonderful opportunity to have financial education on a local aspect as well as a national aspect.
Hi, this is Christopher Hansen with First Nations AWISTA. I'm the Programs Officer for Financial Education and Asset Building Programs here at AWISTA. Let's see. I first started doing financial education rather unwittingly when I sold real estate in Nevada. I sold real estate for about 10 years out there, and I would get a lot of first-time home buyers that would come and not realize that maybe their credit wasn't where it should be, or they weren't quite ready to buy a home yet. So I kind of started coaching them off the cuff, so to speak. And then 4 years ago when I came on with AWISTA, I had a little passion for that. I really enjoyed helping people get into their first homes. So teaching financial education was kind of a natural step for me as I joined AWISTA. And I've been teaching the Train the Trainer classes, as well as doing some community trainings for about 4 years now here at AWISTA.
Crystal?
Hi, so this is Crystal Langholz. I'm our Chief Operating Officer. Before my time at AWISTA, I was the Executive Director of Smooth IP Investments, and like many executive directors when they first start, which also meant I was the loan officer and the financial educator and the everything for quite a while. So I taught our financial education classes for the first year and a half, 2 years of our organizational history. Specifically, we taught it for TANF recipients, and then eventually we had loan products for those who were trying to access our loan products as we were a community development financial institution. And then I got to eventually hire staff, which was very exciting and therapeutic, and then got to oversee kind of a multi-pronged approach to lots of different kinds of financial education classes and oversee our overall efforts on behalf of our community, and got to work, for example, with our tribal council to pass a resolution to make financial education mandatory for all tribal citizens on Kofi Reservation, and for those specifically who worked with the tribal government. So got to be part of not only the financial education efforts, but on the grassroots work there, but also like my colleagues got to do the Building Native Communities Financial Skills for Family classes all throughout the U.S., as well as the community level training. So I love financial education, and I'm glad to talk about it today.
So on behalf of First Nations AWISTA, all of our staff just gave our personal experience insofar with providing financial literacy. But as an organization itself, First Nations and AWISTA, in conjunction with First Nations Development Institute and Fannie Mae back in 1999, actually established and created the Building Native Communities Financial Skills for Families workbook. Now this workbook is the widest used financial literacy curriculum in Indian country per se. It is culturally relevant. We really try to integrate cultural values in conjunction with monetary assets, building your personal assets, which in turn also builds community assets in and of itself. So First Nations AWISTA for the past 15 years has been providing both national and local train the trainers for our Building Native Communities curriculum. Within that training in and of itself, if you come to one of our certification classes, we teach you how to train this course within your community. So within this, we have an array of different learning styles that we talk about in how to be able to connect with various segments of your tribal population in and of itself. We talk about the We talk about the importance of community. We talk about the importance of really investing within Native communities and making our dollars count, not only for ourselves in a personal financial situation, but also for our tribal community in and of itself as a whole. So with the Building Native Communities Financial Train the Trainers, we have trained to date over, I would say, 600 certified trainers that are going back to their local communities now and providing this training to all of Indian country so that we can all see an increase within our tribal members' personal financial status and the uplift of communities across the nation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your information. The next section I'd like to discuss is marketing. And the question we have is, what are some of your marketing strategies? Did you have any unique tools or methods for marketing in different communities?
Let's see. This is Chris again. I like to use a lot of online marketing. If you can share your marketing with partnership networks that can get the word out about your classes. Social media, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat even. It really kind of, plus knowing what market, who your target market is. Like a lot of the younger kids are going to be able to use social media. If you're targeting more adults and elders, maybe doing some more community marketing would be wise. I know a lot of reservations, the radio ads are popular. A lot of times the radio stations will give them free marketing for that. So really knowing who your target market is going to help when you're deciding your marketing strategy.
So on a local level, I'll go both on an institutional for OWISTA, this is Crystal Cornelius, and also on a tribal level. Within rural communities, marketing avenues can actually be, kind of tough to permeate your communities. What we essentially did is we would come up with marketing brochures and we would leave them at very high populated places within the reservation. So for instance, we'd always have some of our program services as well as training calendars set out at the Indian Health Service. We'd have it set out at the tribal headquarters. We have it set up at social service offices throughout the reservation in and of itself. Social media, again, was always very helpful with Facebook pages. And we would also make sure, insofar as marketing, to really be able to permeate community events. So we would try to have presence, not necessarily booths, but within powwows, within community feasts, or any kind of social gathering that we knew there would be a larger amount of people. But quite honestly, what I found, particularly back home on my reservation, is initially it was really hard to get the individual participants in the door. A lot of people, and this goes in conjunction with, marketing a service in particular, which in our case was a Native CDFI providing loans to our community. And again, they had to have that financial literacy in conjunction with lending. But after the first few initial classes, word of mouth really spreads quite a bit. And OWISTA's training that we provide and the training techniques really makes these classes actually very fun, very engaging, and interactive for the participants. So once we took those training tools back home and implemented that in a classroom setting, we ended up having waiting lists for our financial literacy courses because we could only accommodate about 15 to 20 individuals at a time.
Awesome. This is Linnell. One of the things that I know a lot of CDFIs have to deal with is tight budgets. So marketing materials, advertising, all of that. So certain marketing vehicles are a lot more costly than free stuff or inexpensive marketing. So we had to be frugal with the dollars that we had available, being that we were a small nonprofit. So we tried to use as much of the free advertising as possible. So we had a network of radio stations that we were able to do PSAs, which were free. We're kind of at the mercy of the radio stations on when they would run them, but it was a good way to kind of get information out about our classes. We also did the flyers, and we had a network of organizations that we were able to email the flyers to, and they agreed to post in their community buildings or their office locations, organizations. So that was a good way. That was inexpensive. Of course, like was mentioned before, with social media, we did have a Facebook page for our organization, so we were able to post class schedules, pictures, success stories, updates to classes. So if there was ever a cancellation or a modification to date and time, we were able to post it on our social media page. One other tool that we had that maybe some of you may have in your tribal communities is that we had a local radio station that broadcasts specifically in Navajo. And so that had a huge reach to the entire Navajo Nation and surrounding communities. So we would be able to use that also through the free PSAs. So getting a little creative with the limited marketing dollars that you have, those are some ways that we were able to kind of stretch what we had available.
So this is Crystal Langholtz, and I would just say that, I think it sounds like we did a lot of the same things. We specifically did have a list of those partnerships and places that would post and places that we would want to make sure that our posters and stuff got around in town. We called it our moccasin marketing list, but that was fun and it was, cost effective and all those great things. I would say that, we didn't actually have great response, unfortunately. We were really, really excited about it and thought it was the coolest thing ever, and we were, doing really great financial education. But, I wouldn't say we really had great community response at first. It was really about once we got a couple of people there, like in a mandatory capacity. So we made it so that folks who had received government assistance had to go through financial education. And then, like with Crystal, things once we got people in the door and there started to be interest in the community and people started talking about how good the classes were, then that was when we started to be able to get people there in a non-mandatory capacity. But to sort of build critical mass, we actually had to use a couple mandatory methods. And then that was when the flyers and the other sorts of marketing ploys and other strategies really were more effective.
Awesome, great. The next section I have is the class. So what was your typical class size and what were your demographics? I guess I'll start with Crystal Langholtz.
Yeah, so it really ranged, especially as we have started to have more and more kinds of classes. So, I taught classes that were as small as 4 or 5 people. And then our largest BMC that we did ever had free lunch with it. For some reason, we ended up with like 75 people. I think people just started grabbing people, and once more people started grabbing other people, it just kind of spun out of control. And the casino was like, quick, make more Indian tacos, and it was good. So, obviously, a lot of the techniques, that you use in BMC, like working in small groups, you can do with a lot of different class sizes. But we taught specifically, we taught a financial education program that was specifically for teens through our Youth IDA program, and that had about 20 teens in it every year. And then, like I said, for our adults, it kind of ranged across the board at all ages, all sort of capacity levels. Specifically had a lot of luck getting people that were really interested and engaged through the tribal schools, particularly like their teachers. So did some trainings there as part of their in-service, teacher in-service days and those sorts of things. And then, the more comfortable the teachers at the schools were with the topics, the more likely they were to have that be embedded in the schools themselves and then make sure that our youth were getting it. So all ages and all different size classes.
Okay, great. Linnell?
Yeah, so what What we generally had was in our typical class was we would shoot for like at least 8 to 10 to make it a little more cost effective, but of course sometimes we would have lower participation. So we were still able to do it in a smaller group setting, but we also were aware of the timing and the dates and the hours of the classes. So we actually tried a number of delivery of the class schedule. So we would do evening classes. We would try once a week for 7 weeks, or we would do twice a week for 7 weeks to accommodate people that maybe worked from 8 to 5. And then there's people that didn't work traditional work hours, so we offered a class on the weekends as well. So, and the general response was that we had a pretty steady mix of people attending the various classes, which led us to believe that this was a need, that we couldn't just go with a standard 8 to 5 schedule of working families and providing services in the evening. So we did have to have a mix in order to continue to reach everyone and provide a class that was going to work with them. So one of the things that impacted our classes also was the seasons. So sometimes we would have more participation in the spring and summer sessions because we had longer days, more light out. Winter made it a little more difficult because sometimes families had to travel and weather would be a factor in that. We had the capability to provide classes in different communities, so we would travel out. So if you're familiar at all with the Navajo Nation, it's a huge reservation that spans across 3 states. So we had to provide a rolling class schedule to kind of hit different areas of the Navajo Nation in order to kind of reach tribal members that weren't able to come specifically to our office location. So our networks and partnerships were really an important part of that so that we could provide services, and it was still cost effective to the organization.
Crystal?
So this somewhat ties back into the marketing, but our class retention would also fluctuate quite a bit. There would be times when we would have waiting lists, and that was usually in direct correlation with our lending products. We offered business loans, small business, and credit repair loans. We would always run out of available funds. We had restricted funds for credit repair, so when we had those funds available again, typically we'd find larger classes as that was a prerequisite to get a credit repair. And then we also did some partnering with the tribe itself and the Tribal Housing Authority, which would change our class composition. So with the tribe and in a partnership with the tribe, what we did with them, and it really made their lives easier in the long run. So we would have a lot of tribal members that would consistently come to tribal councilmen and ask for monetary funds for one thing or another. Maybe they needed to pay their electricity, or they didn't have enough money to keep the water on, or something of the sort. So with our partnership with the tribe, what we would tell them in those instances is to refer those individuals to our organization for financial literacy courses. They would have to then take that course, go back to the tribe with a certificate in order to be considered for additional funding. The kind of stopgap there essentially was, if we teach individuals how to save and how to budget their money, we could empower them personally, and that may actually cause the tribe to receive less requests, being that we gave them the skill sets needed to manage their own personal assets. And then we also would partner with the Housing Authority with their tenants that were consistently late on rent, and we put that in somewhat as a stopgap as well for eviction processes. So when a particular individual that was in one of the tribal housing sites, if they had missed over 6 months of rent and they were getting to the point where they were going to get evicted, mandatorily we put into the policies that they would have to come and receive financial literacy as well. So our typical class size would really range based on partnerships that we established and community interests. So there would be times that we would have as little as 4 clients, and Linnell's point was really a very good one in that we would see changes within the seasons as well. In North Dakota, it's very, very cold for about 6 months out of the year, and sometimes it would be impossible due to blizzards to attain and continue with those classes. So with typical class size, or I think that really has to do with your demographics. Who's your target market? Are you targeting youth? Are you targeting general tribal population? And again, coupled with your marketing techniques, you can really find different avenues too, and we'll get to that in the later part of this webinar, to assist with class retention and looking at your class sizes.
Chris?
Okay, typical class size for me, since I teach the Train the Trainer for the Building Native Communities Financial Skills for Families, I've been pretty lucky as far as class size. Our classes generally tend to be at a national training between 30 and 40 people at a training. Not to say that they're all like that. I have taught a Train the Trainers where there are only 3 people in. So it really just depends on where the class is going to be held and who the target market is for that class. We hold these Train the Trainer national trainings all over the country. So as far as demographics go, we get a lot of people coming from anywhere from Alaska to Florida, from Maine to Hawaii even. So we've had, pretty much across the board, people flying into these different trainings. And then we also do community trainings as well, where the class sizes can be a little smaller.
Okay, great. I'm just going to skip ahead to our retention section. So what are some of the strategies what are some of your strategies around class retention? And I'm going to start back with Christopher Hansen.
Let's see, strategies for class retention. I think the big one that everybody probably has heard by now, if you feed them, they will come. If you're able to provide, some kind of food, whether it be potluck, or if you're lucky enough to have some money in your program budget to supply food, that's key. Let's see, childcare is another, if you can provide childcare. Again, this kind of goes back to knowing what your target market is as well. If you think your students are going to need childcare, having a volunteer there to watch the kids, or even if you can have the class at a facility that maybe at a daycare or something that has where there's toys or places where people can bring their kids, that can help a lot too.
Great. Lynell?
Yeah, so coming from a rural Native community, I know retention for financial education classes can be an issue, especially if you expand the classes beyond a couple of weeks. So if you're using the BNC, generally you have about 14 hours of education being provided. So doing boot camp style, maybe you have 2 classes, 7-day sessions, or 7-hour sessions, or else spreading it out over 7 weeks even. So that can be difficult to keep that momentum and keep them coming back to the later sessions. So just be cognizant of the distance they have to travel, the time that they're committing to, the time of the year, so the weather can be an issue. But also, if you're able to provide incentives, that's a good way to kind of get people to continue to come back, and that can be your door prizes, raffle items. They don't have to be expensive things. They can be, what we've done was we've gone to the local dollar store and actually picked up and put together $5 baskets. And so it kind of just feeds the thing, that feeling of getting something for free and actually winning something. So sometimes that can help with participation in the classes. One of the things that we did as well was upon graduation, if the participants completed all of the sessions, we would award them with their certificate of completion, but as well we would give them a gas card to kind of compensate for that additional expense for them traveling back and forth to the classes. So going back to budgetary constraints, so I know providing food and incentives can be tight with a lot of the organizations that are providing financial education. So this is maybe where you can build out your network and possibly look at in-kind contributions from financial institutions or local businesses that are in support of financial education. It doesn't have to be much, because I think as nonprofit organizations providing financial education, we can be pretty frugal, and we can actually really make those dollars stretch by using like dollar stores or low-cost food refreshments and such. So that would probably be my best recommendation for like getting people to come back.
We found, this is Crystal Cornelius, we found that the timing of the classes really had a lot to do with retention. So as Linnell was previously indicating, if you stretch those classes out to 6 or 7 weeks, we found that to be a little bit difficult in our community. Number one, we found that, you know, over half of our clients typically wouldn't come back. And two, when you look at the particular sessions and the curriculum within B&C, we found it's more helpful if you really provide those in conjunction at a quicker time schedule together. And that was just our personal experience. So what we did insofar as class retention, we would always hold a course once a month on the weekends to accommodate working individuals that maybe couldn't make the night classes we had. So we would once a month do a Saturday from noon to 4 and a Sunday from noon to 4 to get the curriculum completed. And then the rest of our courses we would always hold from 6 to 9 at night, 3 days in a row straight through the month to try to alleviate the longer drawn out sessions. And you know, this is all going to be different based on your target market and your community. So although that's what we had seen in my community, doesn't necessarily mean that's what you'll see on your side. Again, having some kind of incentive is always helpful, especially childcare. If you can find maybe an intern or a high school student that's willing to do some community service to help in that measure is also very, very helpful, and helps you know, working families come that may not have the availability just to leave their children at home. And then we were also really fortunate just to be able to partner with the tribe with some local businesses. So we would always ask local businesses for donations. So if that was our local grocery store owner, she would give us donuts, let's say, every other class, and we would be sure and make a plug to her organization, which they found free marketing in that aspect as well. So it's really good just to see if you can reach out insofar as providing incentives. And granted, that's not always needed, because sometimes the only incentive people are going to need is to change their personal financial situation, and that's enough. They need the they need the tools, and they need the skills in order to do so. If you're able to provide something added, that's a benefit. Don't think, though, in return, in terms of class retention, that you always need to provide a gift. That's always, it's very beneficial if you can, but not necessarily an end-all, be-all to getting your classrooms filled up.
Crystal Langholz?
I love this, Crystal. So I just had a couple of thoughts, and you guys really covered a lot of the great things. I think what Linnell was talking about, you know, she talked about the certificates that you give at the end of class, and I just would say that if you do a long, drawn-out class, it's really important to make, like, getting that certificate like a really important community celebration kind of thing. So, like, you know, it's a potluck for the whole family, and you're kind of celebrating, you know, really make that a celebration. And then you'll find that oftentimes, you know, those family members that came to that potluck are going to be the ones who are going to be in your next class. So, I mean, really trying to make that, like, you know, that certificate, that statement of you did this, and look at all the things that you're doing for your family and your future. You know, making that a real statement through your last class, through the presentation of certificates and things like that, I think really helps with that word of mouth part, and it really helps, you know, bring people back as far as keeping the sustainability of your overall program. I would also say, you know, with that, being flexible to people, you know, there were very few people, I think, that dropped out of our classes just because they, you know, decided that they were boring, or it was usually because somebody was sick, or there was usually something going on. So one of the things I found really important was to call people immediately, if they didn't show up in classes, to really let them know, like, that they were missed. Like, we were, hey, where are you at? Do you want to come in and work with me on the section tomorrow that you missed? And trying to get you caught up so that you can rejoin the class. Because I think the sooner you catch those people, the more likely they are to, keep going and make it through the whole program. I also would just say, too, that it's really important to embed your classes in other kinds of community programming and other kinds of things. So I talked already about how we used to have it be part of in-service at the school, and we used to have financial education as part of like the workforce programs that were happening. It sounds like Crystal used to have it as part of the home as part of their partnership with the Home Authority and the Housing Authority. So, really having those be embedded in already other kinds of things. We would there's a safety fair on Crow Creek every year, and so we would set up a booth and we talk, like, it would be called "Be Safe with Your Money." It was like the biggest stretch ever, but we would actually do like financial coaching right there on the spot for people. So just being creative about how you embed those, so that that it's adapted, like everyone else is talking to the needs of your community. And I would just say, I really thought this retention issue was a huge issue for people. And we do an annual instructor survey with people, with all of our certified instructors, to get a sense of how they're doing on retention and all sorts of other different kinds of issues. And I think it's really exciting to report that from our certified financial educators who are doing financial education, 70% of the students graduate a DNC program, make it all the way through classes, which I think is probably higher than what we saw in Crow Creek. I think on Crow Creek it was probably more like 60%. So I know that there are some other financial educators on the line, and I just want to say you guys are doing really great jobs being creative and adapting those things in your own community.
Okay, great. And on that note, did you have any specific reminder system for upcoming classes, or were there any specific incentives in place for attending future classes? Was there anything regular? I'll start with Crystal on the line.
Crystal Ringholz? Okay, I'll jump in. But I would just say we definitely called people the day before classes, and specifically at the beginning. It's like if, for example, you advertised in March and the classes started in April, we would call the day before classes started. I also would get the numbers of people, and I would often text them. Like if people were 5 minutes, if like we were 5 minutes in a class and I had Susie, I'm like texting Susie, like, hey, Susie, come into class. Just because, particularly for our classes that were more longer and smaller class size, those were really key as far as making that individual attention through that kind of in-person monitoring and reminding, I think, can really help.
Okay, great. Linnell?
Yeah, so sending out reminders for upcoming classes is a nice little balance from being annoying by sending too many reminders to making sure that you're going to get your participants there. So one of the things that we did was we sent out a save the date postcard about 2 weeks in advance of the class, so the people that were interested in participating in the financial education class, they would receive that postcard that hopefully ends up on the fridge or somewhere where they have that constant view of it. And then we also did the same thing. We would actually call the participants a couple of days before the class to kind of get a good head count, and then just find out if they would be in attendance. So I know reminder systems were like a big part of making sure that we had participants in the class. And when we were doing financial education, a lot of our tribal community members didn't have access to the internet or email addresses, but now it's pretty common that even in rural communities someone does have access to internet, usually through your smartphones. So having that texting system set up or being able to just post updates to social media pages is a good way to ensure that they have that constant view of any updates to the class, and also just giving them that reminder of the next upcoming schedule.
Crystal?
This is Crystal Cornelius. So we employed quite a bit of what Crystal and Linnell indicated. It's always a good idea to have an intake form. So have a waiting list, or for those individuals that you know are interested in the class, get their personal information and give them that personal phone call. We would also, the week of the class and then the day of the class, we had a really good relationship with our local radio station. So we would have them advertise that in the morning. They have a special morning show that is highlights the details of the day every morning and what's going on with the community. So that was always really beneficial. I would say, 90% of our tribal membership have that radio station on in the mornings, or the tribal buildings or offices as well. So we always found that a really good reminder in place to attend classes. And other than that, we would indicate via our social media. Our Facebook page was also very helpful, but I don't think people really got onto our page much, but more so when we would update, it would show up on their feed. So we'd really try to have a lot of individuals like the page so they would be able to see that. But really somewhat, basic reminder systems. Again, if you have the funding to do so and to, mark it in paper form can be very beneficial, but you can also find that the just personal contact with reaching out to your prospective, if you have their information, is also very helpful.
Okay, great. The next question is, what options were in place if a student could not attend a class? And I'll start with Christopher.
Yes, options in place if a student cannot attend a class. Well, being that I do a lot of the train-the-trainer classes, a lot of times it's a 3-day intensive training class. I do have once in a while, though, where someone isn't able to make a third day, or there's a family emergency. And if you have the manpower to do this, I actually will tutor them one-on-one to help them with what they've missed and to help them become a certified trainer. So that's something that I like to offer. Again, that can take up a lot of time, though, so make sure that you schedule it out a little bit.
What we would do, this is Crystal Cornelius, we would have several options. So number one, of course, we would like to do an inquiry on why you missed the class. If you just didn't feel like it that day, it's quite different than if you've got a flat tire and weren't able to make it, of course. But we help in either regard as well, so there was no judgment call there. But we would offer to have that individual come in, and whatever sessions they missed, we would personally tutor them, so they could get their certificate of completion in the end, or based on our scheduling for the classes in and of itself, we had an annual calendar that was set up every year. So the client also had the option, if they missed, one day, which was a particular set of the curriculum, let's say, section 5 or 6, they could come back that following month and just come back to that particular session or sessions that they missed, be able to complete that and then get their certificate for completion.
And for us, one of the things that we did, we tried not to be too rigid with the financial education, but we wanted to place high value on completing the class and having them be able to graduate and receive that certificate of completion. But most of our classes were held over 7 weeks, or we had 7 sessions. So we allowed for participants to miss 2 of the sessions due to an emergency or someone was sick, no child care, things like that. We did allow for that. We also gave them the opportunity to take the class at a later date. So whatever they happened to miss, they would be able to participate and still get that same information, but still being able to graduate. But any more than that, then we would recommend that they just go ahead and withdraw from the class and participate in the next round of financial education, because we did really emphasize the certificate of completion, and like I said before, we wanted to put like a high value on it, like this is something that you want to strive for and attain for, and it's actually worth something. The information is really good information, even though it's being provided for free. So that was kind of how we enforced it in a way. Crystal?
Yeah, it sounds like ours was structured a little bit like Linnell's in that, yeah, you would have, we did have a policy in place around how many classes you could miss, and I think that is part of maintaining the flexibility that students need while still providing that value around finishing and completion and what that means. So, yeah, having a written policy that you can communicate at the very beginning, and particularly, I think having to, we had a little agreement that people had to sign at the beginning of class that basically said, I understand that if I don't attend 5 of the 7 classes, or in our case, we did it over usually over 6 weeks, but that they know that they won't be able to graduate, and having something that they signed that you can reference later on, I think really helps with sort of that buy-in to what that process were. But having that flexibility too for people that are really engaged. And so if people did have to take some of those absences, they did have to come in and work with us. But we were there and we were ready and excited to do that. So definitely finding that the middle ground there between the flexibility needed while still setting the value on the people that do go through the program and are committed.
Okay, great. I'm just going to skip ahead and open it up to our question and answer slide. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question and answer section of the platform, or please raise your hand and I'm happy to unmute you.
I would also add that anybody that wants to share, so for example, I see Don and Arnold are on the line. Those are really, I know there's some really great financial educators on the line. If you guys have specific things that you want to share around these issues too, we'd love to listen to that as well.
Okay, while everyone's thinking of their question, I'll just ask the final question to our panelists. If there were any changes you would make for your financial education classes to assist with class retention, what would they be?
Well, I think one of the things that we realized was that at the very beginning of delivering financial education, it was that we didn't have a good reminder system set up. We just figured that once we advertised, people would join in on the classes. But we quickly learned that we needed to have a good reminder system in place, which is why we did the save the date cards, and then we started calling people. But I think now through the age of electronic communication, on intake forms we would be able to capture email addresses, and generally a lot of people do respond that way. They constantly, we're in the world where people constantly check email. Text messaging I think is really incredibly awesome, just to send that reminder that class is tonight at this time, and if there were any homework assignments, you can send through text messages a reminder to bring their completed homework assignments from the classes. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I would have changed through the delivery of our our financial education classes.
Hi, this is Crystal Cornelius. I think one thing that we didn't necessarily mention but can definitely help with class retention is evaluations. So again, depending on the class composition, every time that you hold a financial literacy class within your community, you're going to have a different segment of your target market. It may be more elders, it may be more youth, A, B, C, D, E. So I think within the evaluation process, it's always very important to get a pre and post after, because with that you can receive constructive criticism on what works well within training techniques and what doesn't within your community. And ultimately, I think that can really help with class retention, because some exercises may not be really viable within your community, where others may work more. So I think when you're really able to gauge your community and what they find beneficial or what they're comfortable with, can really help you model on the long learning curve. And it's always going to be changing within, teaching the courses within your community, what works very well for them in order to retain their attention, and number two, to get additional clients within your doors for financial education.
So this is Crystal Langholz, and I love what Crystal Cornelius said so much. But I would just add too that I wish I had tried to make it fun sooner. So I didn't go to any BNC certified trainings when I started teaching. We started with the curriculum, and so I just really pretty cut and dried. And I wasn't a terrible financial educator. Like, I used personal examples and I tried to be funny, but it just wasn't interactive sort of environment. And I remember then we got staff, and I sent them to our BNC program, and they came back and they were all like, "Oh, we need to get Play-Doh for the tables." And I remember being like, "What? Like, why do we need toys? I don't get this." Like, and I just didn't. I really didn't get it. I wasn't quick enough to sort of adapt that model. But once we did, and we sort of really made it fun and interactive, it was amazing how much more willing people were to both come and share, and actually really focus why they were there, instead of just kind of blowing me off. So yeah, that was something. That's a change that we did make, but we didn't make it soon enough.
I think on one last note, it's always very, very important too, as a trainer, when you set the stage for your class, you set the stage for your participants, that you come in and it's something that I think you learn to do without necessarily saying so, but there really has to be an issuance of trust within the class and within the participants themselves, I think, which really assists with class retention. So people have to know, and you have to be the leader in that platform, to say, you know what, we may be talking about, things that are uncomfortable with saving or with our own financial budgets. Please feel free to share if you wish. And, we ask the rest of the class to please be respectful of each other, not interrupt. Things that are said within this venue, necessarily stay within this venue. So I think when you also, provide that springboard of confidence and trust, you'll also find a great increase within your retention of the class, because people are going to be willing to share and actually learn more.
And one last comment too that just kind of came to mind was that you, as financial educators, are their biggest cheerleader. And so sometimes they come in with low confidence. They feel bad because they have credit issues, financial issues that they've experienced. But you, as the educator and coach, you need to continuously build them up, that we've all experienced these things at one point in our lives, or if you haven't, then chances are you will at some point in your life. But the whole reason for the financial education class is that you're providing tools and resources to help them make better choices and to be better armed to deal with situations that they're going to address at some point in their life. So I encourage you to all tap your inner cheerleader and just continue to motivate your participants and your clients.
Okay, great. Well, that about wraps it up. That's our time. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our newsletter. Our upcoming webinar is on green energy lending. That'll be Tuesday, May 17th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Registration is now up at www.owista.org. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you so much for listening in on our webinar, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. I learned a ton from this webinar, and I hope everyone else did as well. Please look for our follow-up email. It will have a recording of today's webinar with a lot of resources. And if you missed this webinar or missed any future ones or past ones, please look on our website at www.owista.org for an archive of all of our webinars. Thank you and have a wonderful day.